You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, man, it's good to have you back on again and to get to talking some more draft.
Yeah, man, we got to enjoy it as much as we can while we can. You know, everybody's just like anxious now for the draft to finally come, but you guys are going to be really sad. I'm going to be sad, but you guys will be sad too once, you know, the draft will come and go, and then it'll be the dead period. And, you know, baseball's fun, basketball playoffs, all that stuff. I was going to say a bad word there. and getting to do all the outdoor activities, you know, whatnot. I'm a big camper, love hiking, kayaking, fishing, the likes of that. I mean, obviously we talk a little bit of disc golf on here. I enjoy that too. But, you know, once the draft goes, it's a sad time. You know, I'm going to be to get over it. I don't know if you saw my tweet today. Brandon Perna was talking about it, you know, those virgins, as he called them, that start the draft process, you know, in December. And I'm like, my guy, once May is here, I'm ready to start doing 2020 film. Like, for real. Like, I'm ready to start on that, man. I'm excited about some of the defensive players next year and the wide receivers. We're going to maybe Chad will probably say, hey, you know, people a little bit drafted out. We're going to do one episode before the season starts on 2020 draft. Like, we gotta. Otherwise, I'm going to be like itching at my wrists, you know, like pulling the skin back, freaking out.
Yeah, no, I remember last year I had to laugh so hard. I think the Saturday, it was like halfway through Saturday, and you were texting me about prospects of 2019 draft, going, hey, have you watched this guy? And I'm like, no, you know, I haven't watched this guy. And I had to laugh because I was like, you know what? I think I need a month. And I think every day you were texting me with different names of people to watch. And so you are a madman when it comes to the draft, and I love it.
I need football. Like, they need to have a summer developmental league. I'm sad I didn't even hardly watch very much AAF, but I'm sad it folded. And if they'd have had it like that period between draft and preseason, I'd be in. You know, like, that's the time that they need to be in on it.
Right. I was going to say, this is still a huge time of year for the NFL. Yeah. There's still stories galore everywhere.
They're dominating the headlines still.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I mean, basketball season's going on, and baseball season started. I mean, everybody's excited about that. But I mean, NBA, it's kind of going on. The college basketball tournament ended now. I mean, it's NFL. The fact that the NFL can dominate from August to April, incredible, absolutely incredible.
That it is. And I will say, I saw something really funny the other day I'm sorry to pick on you Rockies fans a little bit, but it was, oh man, we suck again. And, you know, they're what, 10, 11 games into the season, something like that. And yeah, Rockies are 3-8. I guess we can't really say too much more at being Cardinals fans and only being 5-5. And that darn bullpen, man. But hey, that's baseball. We got to talk some football because that's what we're here for. And I just want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Dumler MHH. And of course, Nick is at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles on all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, like you said, we're getting to that bittersweet time here very soon. I think we're 16 days out from the start of the draft, something like that.
It's going to be here very soon. Here, you know what? Here, draftcountdown.com. I'll give you the exact time if you bear with me here. 16 days, 2 hours, 46 minutes, and 15 seconds.
Woo! There you go. So that's we got to get in as much draft stuff as we can for you guys, and we love this. But one thing we wanted to talk about here is some of the big news that's been coming out for the Broncos about the draft is all these official visits, because this is the time they're bringing in players. I think Drew Lock is supposed to be in this week. And I mean, he's the big one that they're supposed to wine and dine. All the other players we're going to talk about throughout this list. But we just want to take a look at some of the players that they brought in. And in the past, the Broncos haven't really done much of the players that they bring in. It seems like it's more been a smokescreen of, hey, we're bringing this guy in, but we're actually not really all that interested in him. I think we talked about it in the past of Jay Cutler. I don't think they even hardly talked to him before they drafted him, right?
Yeah, but that was major smokescreen. They had to move up decently for him, and I don't think they talked once, but maybe they should have. Looking back on it. Although, didn't they get 2 first-round picks for him?
Yeah, they did.
That's a win. That's a win.
Right.
Who even cares? Like, at that point, like that's a major win.
Right. Well, and people forget when he was with the Broncos, he threw for over 4,000 yards, was a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, he was a good pairing with Shanahan. It's when the whole, we don't even want to mention his name, came in and everything got destroyed. I'm not saying Jay Cutler is this great quarterback, but when you're looking at drafted quarterbacks for the Broncos, he's got to be at the top of the list. I mean, of the last 20 years at least. And
hey, man, don't sleep on Deebo.
Deebo helped get us to Manning.
That's what I say about Josh McDaniels, too. Honestly,
Yeah.
like without Josh McDaniels, we never get Von Miller. Without Von Miller, we probably don't get Peyton Manning. So I'm not a big country fan, but Rascal Flats, even if some people will be irritated that I even called that country. But God bless the broken road that led me straight to you, Peyton and Von. I love you. I love you.
Oh, man, we're just we cover a wide variety of topics here on this show for sure. But no, I mean, it just in the past, like I said, they've thrown a lot of smoke screens out there, and really they just don't usually look at the players. I don't think they brought in Bradley Chubb last year, did they?
No, and I still am very, very skeptical that they did not have a scenario where Bradley Chubb fell to them. Like, if they didn't, shame on them. Like, that you're picking 5. You should have a scenario where anybody can fall to you.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't know. Like, you it's $1 million industry. That just smells of BS to me.
Well, it's like every year teams always say, oh, man, we got the highest guy on our board. He was top 10. We can't believe that he was there. The teams always say that. So, yeah, you're right. That's probably not even a reality of the situation. But, I mean, of course, they would have had Bradley Chubb rated very high because they had a trade in place with Buffalo to move back in case all their guys were not there. One of their guys was there. They took him. Well, this year, I feel like it's a little bit different. I feel like they're not throwing out as many smoke screens. I think these are a lot of guys that they actually do like and guys that they want to get to know a little bit better. And it makes sense because a lot of the guys on their list are guys that very much fit the Broncos, fit exactly what they need. And let's start here with this first group. And we're going to start with the obvious position, and it's the quarterbacks. And right now, so far, these are the ones that we know that the Broncos have brought in or are bringing in Drew Lock, Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, Daniel Jones, and Clayton Thorson. And 4 of those guys are expected to be the top 4 quarterbacks taken in the draft, probably first round. And then, of course, Clayton Thorson, probably that late round project, 4th, 5th round kind of guy.
I think he's going to go earlier than that.
Do you?
I really do. Like, I don't think his tape reflects that, but a lot of people very connected to the NFL draft are talking about him as a top 100 pick. So I think he's going to end up going day 2. Like, I think he's going to go before like Jarrett Stidham. Like, I think Will Grier is going to go in that range as him, but like I think Thorson's going to go day 2. He's got some athleticism, played in a offense that asked him to play some pro style concepts. I mean, I constantly had a talent disadvantage and pretty intelligent kid. I mean, I know that there's going to be some people on here. Even I have to kind of fight against it. But Northwestern quarterback. Oh no, he's just Trevor Siemian. Worst logic of all time.
Yeah,
like that's literally the worst logic of all time.
Right. Yeah, that's not the case for sure.
So yeah, no, this is. I am very surprised they did not bring in Jarrett Stidham. I'll be completely honest. Given everything we've heard, Scangarello is, again, it's rumor season. Could be complete BS, but I feel like these rumors bat about 600. So I'll tend to that's a little bit better than 50-50. So I'll lean into them. But Jarrett Stidham is a guy that apparently Scangarello, even before he was brought in, was pretty high on his prospects. So I thought they'd bring in him. But out of these guys coming in, if you had to rank them, how would you rank them?
Honestly, I'm going to pound the table for Drew Lock as my top quarterback.
Wow. Okay.
Just because I do see the fit with what the Broncos want to do. You look at them being a run-first team, but you want a quarterback that can challenge every inch of the field. Not saying that Murray or Haskins and Jones kind of can't challenge most of the areas of the field, but
Jones
I feel
challenges
like
the field because he's an athlete.
That's true. That is
it's kind of a different level of challenging the field. Like, I'm definitely not Daniel Jones hype at 10, but like, he's an underrated athlete, man. He tested really well at the combine.
He ran like a 4.67. Is that right? Or was that Drew Lock?
Yeah, solid 40-yard dash, 4.81. So not the best 40-yard dash, but it's actually the jumps and everything that were pretty impressive with him, and the 3-cone. But a 91st percentile broad jump, 76 vertical jump, and 70th 3-cone, along with decent size. So, yeah, I mean, he compares – some of the guys he compares to are Josh Allen, Tanner Lee, some solid athletes in last year's draft. So he's a solid athlete. I think he also had pretty good athletic testing at the Duke Pro Day as well.
Right. And it's Drew Lock. He ran a 4.69.
Yes, he actually very tested. His 3-cone was crazy. Right.
And so, I mean, this is actually a pretty athletic group of quarterbacks when you're looking at this draft coming up. I mean, it's not just Kyler Murray, but I think of Drew Lock being that just fit of what they want there in Denver. I think they like that he is that 4-year starter. He's a guy that worked through a lot of difficult times there at Missouri. He's got the captaincy that when he was there, he's got the big arm that Elway always likes. He's put up a lot of pretty good numbers throughout the years. He's gotten better over his time in college, has worked through different offenses. All this, there's a lot of positives. I mean, there's plenty of negatives, but there's things that you look at and you say, I think I can clean this up. Not perfect, but you can at least clean it up to where he can become a very decent starter in the NFL. Kyler Murray, I don't think Elway's a big fan of his. One, I think he's going to go number 1 overall anyway, whether it's Oakland or Arizona. Kyler Murray's going number 1 overall. Haskins, I go back and forth on him a lot of times. There's games I watch, I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. And then other games where everything is like 5 yards or shorter.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, okay, he has a great completion percentage. He has all these stats and yards and everything else. But it just seems like it's more letting your athletes go and just make plays for you.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So I'm a little underwhelmed when it comes to Haskins. At least Drew Lock, I'm sitting there saying a lot of times he is at a disadvantage being in the SEC on a poor team.
I wouldn't call him poor. Average.
Okay, average team. But, I mean, you're playing some of the top-tier teams in the NFL – or not in the NFL, in college football that have a lot of great defensive players. And he goes out there and, I mean, he didn't play great against the top-tier talent. But against that next level, he was always right there competing, keeping his team in some games that they probably shouldn't have been in. And he's making some throws in some tight windows that I don't think some of these other quarterbacks could make. And so, again, I just have him as my top quarterback just because I think he's a great fit. I think he's a guy that's going to be well-liked in the locker room. I love the way that Benjamin Albright describes him. He's Jay Cutler without the terrible attitude. And to me, I mean, again, Jay Cutler he had a great arm. It was pretty watching him throw a football. It again came down to just personality issues that really hindered a lot of his ability to grow. A lot of times it felt like it was everybody else's fault but Jay Cutler's. I mean, how many offensive coordinators did he get fired? Yet Jay Cutler stayed. It just seemed like it was everybody else's fault but his. And so I look at Drew Lock and I say, here's a guy that's worked with different coaches, has performed well, has grown in his time, and just seems like a guy that's ready to learn. I'll get off my rant now, but that's why I have him as my top guy.
Yeah, for me, as much as this is cheating, I feel like the tiered-based stuff, I could see Lock, Murray, or Haskins all quarterback 1, depending on the system you run. I do think that if Murray was just a little bit bigger, had another year of tape on him, I would be higher on him, but there's just some height concerns with me. I think you do have to have a specific type of offense to work him specifically, but I mean, his ability to throw vertically, really good arm, and movement in the pocket, and just his explosiveness in short areas, almost like a point guard. I think it was a good friend of the show, Andre Simone, called him, if Allen Iverson got to play football. Because Allen Iverson was, I believe, an all-state quarterback, state champion a couple of times, but because of his size, played basketball. And that's how I see Murray, that kind of athlete. So I would love him in this system, but the concern is, again, 1-year starter, not a lot of work under center, and the height. I mean, it is a concern. So you got to kind of change the offense. And because of those things, and with him going first overall, I think it's more about getting the scouting report on him, seeing what makes him tick, seeing what works for him. Maybe you can adapt some stuff. I definitely want my quarterback coach, my offensive coordinator in there grilling him. And, you're getting a scouting report. There's a chance that one of these guys ends up with Oakland. There's a chance that one of these guys ends up with the Chargers. So you got to be doing the work there and finding these guys. So I think that's what it comes down to. And you got to let yourself be able to fall in love. You can't be too chastised because of the Paxton Lynch thing. You got to go in, eyes open. You have to learn something from that experience, but you got to take something away. So I think for this offense, and after talking with Jordan Palmer at the combat or at Julok's Julok's Pro Day, I do think Locke is the system fit. I mean, watching him move around, throw the ball on the move, velocity, athleticism, that's stuff that matters to me, especially for this offense. Who was it? Is Jimmy Garoppolo the best athlete? No, he's more of a Daniel Jones, which kind of scares me at 10 overall. Who was the guy that killed it for them last year? Nick Mullins, more of a kind of that short area guy, not a great athlete, solid athlete, not a great arm, but I think he really can unlock a lot of this offense. Again, like you said, Jay Cutler wise, with the athleticism and arm talent of Drew Lock. He has flaws. He's going to have to work on resetting his base, being smarter with the football. But I think that more than ever, quarterback to me, I've said, talking about character and evaluating these guys, but quarterback is not just a tape evaluation these days. It is a personality evaluation. This guy is the liaison to the coaching staff, to the front office, to the rest of the locker room. He is the face of the franchise. And, as good as Josh Rosen was, there's obviously something there that is a concern. Personality-wise, at work ethic, there's something there that, we don't see from where we're at. But when you guys got guys like Baker Mayfield and even Sam Darnold, they're the pulse of that team. I mean, even if the Jets, picking third overall this year, do you think they think they're in a bad spot? No, they got their quarterback. So personality is a big fit, and I think that's the reason you need to bring these guys in. Final note I want to bring on these quarterbacks before I want to talk a little bit more Daniel Jones and Clayton Thorson. Dwayne Haskins, I hear people talking about him and referencing the stats, referencing his winning percentage. Shove that stuff. I'm not here for that. But the thing with me, the reason is Dwayne Haskins might be falling compared to these other guys. And I'm pointing at, again, Josh Rosen. He is a quarterback that is going to be dependent on his offensive line. I think more and more in today's NFL, you have to have a quarterback that can create with their legs, not necessarily as a runner, but create and make that first pass rusher miss and then make the play, break, contain, make the play. I mean, we've seen it with the best of the best. That was one reason that Jared Goff struggled, and one reason Jared Goff is going to be limited. I mean, he's a great quarterback, franchise quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he's going to be limited because he's only as good as his offensive line. And I think the same can be said with Haskins, and I think we're seeing that more and more as an area of emphasis with team evaluators when it comes to the quarterback. It's the reason that Jared Goff, obviously the system mattered, but going to a heavy play action system where he has a better offensive line, not asked to move around, looks a lot better. There's a reason Josh Allen, or Josh Rosen getting absolutely pulverized in Arizona. Quarterbacks that are more so dependent on their offensive line. And I think that is the big thing with Murray and Locke compared to Haskins. That might put Haskins down.
Right. The quarterback that comes to mind for me is Derek Carr.
Yeah.
He had the best offensive line in football on his great statistic year where he was getting talked about as a top 5 quarterback, had a great running game, great offensive line, great weapons to work with, all those kind of things. And he goes out there and puts up all these stats and everybody's going, oh my gosh, this guy's finally emerged. Well, then the offensive line starts getting some injuries. He's starting to get a bunch of dings and everything else. His weapons aren't quite as good. And I mean, you've just seen his stats just plummet back to what he was before. And I'm not saying that he's a terrible quarterback, but it's just kind of showing again, sometimes quarterbacks are dependent on some of the players around them. You have those quarterbacks that raise everybody else's game, like a Tom Brady. I mean, you look at some of his weapons other than Gronk. I mean, I know some people are saying Edelman for Hall of Fame, but he's not a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Come on, people.
Delete yourself. Don't even delete your account. Delete yourself. Just walk into the woods.
Yes. But, I mean, again, that's Tom Brady. And you were talking about a guy that can make a first guy miss. Tom Brady is the king of taking one step and making a guy miss. Yeah. He is not an athlete at all. At all. I mean, anybody remember the Super Bowl where he was trying to play receiver?
Yeah.
That was not pretty. But he knows how to move in the pocket. And if you can't move in the pocket very well, then you need either a great offensive line or at least to be an athlete. And Drew Lock, Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, all those guys are at least really good athletes. And I think they've shown a little bit where, like Kyler Murray, teams worry about him taking off running. So they can't rush as fast. They can't just bend around the corner because he'll
he's
just
much more disciplined in the lanes. Yeah,
exactly. Drew Lock, I think he does a pretty darn good job of knowing when to move out of the pocket. Plus, he has the arm. If somebody is coming at him, he can still throw off that back foot and make a completion. Dwayne Haskins, not as much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm with you there. I think that is becoming more of a trait that you need because you're getting such incredible athletes on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, we're talking about some guys with Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, Justin Simmons whenever he gets healthy.
Jeffrey Simmons,
sorry, not Justin Simmons. Oh, my goodness.
He better stay healthy.
Yeah, he better stay. But, and what's already in the NFL, Aaron Donald, your boy Chris Jones. I mean, there's
Buckner, Akeem Hicks. You're talking interior defensive line now. You're not even talking edge talent.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying is it's across the defensive line. You used to have the big uglies that you didn't have to worry about as much in the middle, and you just kind of worried about the edge guys. Well, now it's everywhere. They can come from anywhere.
And not only that, they will find your weakest matchup. They'll put the best pass rusher there, and good luck. I mean, that's what the Chargers did against the Ravens. They found that weakness on the interior, put Ingram over him, and there goes your offense.
Right.
It's over.
Right. And so, yeah, having a quarterback that can move around, make some plays with their feet, make a defense have to continue to cover beyond 2-3 seconds. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I hate to mention that name, but he made some spectacular plays outside the pocket.
That's when he made his plays. I mean,
right.
Honestly, he's great in the pocket, but when playing him, you got to contain. It's like playing Russell Wilson. It's the same thing. I call him, excuse my French, but slippery little shits. Because if they get out of the pocket, you are on your hands. You are just biting your lip because that's when the magic happens. So I think that's a big thing to speak of how the league's changing.
Right. And one could argue those were the two best quarterbacks in the NFL this last year. I mean, Drew Brees and Tom Brady obviously have an argument to be in there, but I would still put Russell Wilson because he didn't have hardly any talent around him this last year. And, I mean, Patrick Mahomes had countless talent, but he also took advantage of it big time to have a very, very good season. And so, again, that's kind of the younger quarterback push that you're seeing in the NFL these days. And so it makes sense why people would be pushing down Haskins right now. It's why you're hearing that he could be that third or even maybe fourth quarterback off the board.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about his – I mean, we're throwing it way back now. It feels like years ago when we had Joe Goodberry on the podcast, but he talked about Haskins is like the immobile Alex Smith because he's just so conservative with the ball, especially pushing it deep. And that's going to limit your offense. How much is that schematically Ohio State? How much is that Haskins? That remains to be seen. That's we're talking about a 1-year sample size here that just adds more risk. So it's I would be happy with any of the top 3 quarterbacks, being completely honest. But I do think schematically, Drew Lock makes the most sense. Also, Drew Lock, given that he has better tools, but he needs a year to marinate, so to speak. You have Joe Flacco here, so it just makes too much sense for me.
One final question here.
Okay.
Because I know we've been talking about quarterbacks quite a bit. We got plenty of other players to get to here.
You should talk a little bit about Thorson and Jones as well.
Well, yeah, we can talk about them here in just a second, but I want to ask this question because I see this all the time of people saying, we got Joe Flacco. There's no way Broncos are taking a quarterback at 10. When did Joe Flacco become this franchise quarterback?
Right after Raheem Moore missed that deep pass.
Well, I get that, but I mean, you look at his career, he's never been this amazing quarterback. He has a few playoff stats. He had his great playoff run, 4 games that made him millions upon millions of dollars. But beyond that, he's been an average quarterback. I mean, I do think he's an upgrade over what we had in Case Keenum. Don't get me wrong. But the idea that we're settled at quarterback for this year, and I mean, I can understand waiting until 2020, but I don't think quarterback is even close to being off the board at pick 10 for the Broncos.
I don't disagree with you. I think that, also the thing is, how often are you going to be picking up here? Or do you plan to be back here next year? So we'll see. If there's a guy you got to let yourself be vulnerable, fall in love. And if he's your dude, take him. But, we got to talk about these other 2 guys coming in now because we've talked a lot about Murray, Haskins, and Locke. Right. But Daniel Jones, either of these quarterbacks, if they go 10 overall, especially Clayton Thorson, either of them, if they go 10 overall, I resign. Don't put me on record, Carl. I love you too much. I couldn't do that to you. But,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, The thing that is concerning is that I do think, not concerning, but like at 10 overall, Daniel Jones is just a very limited player to me, limited arm talent. I don't think his accuracy is actually all that good. A lot of it is very RPO predicated, and there's going to be a transition for him in the league. Now, he did play with that shoulder injury this year. That did affect him. I do love how just he has balls of steel in the pocket. Like there's times where he's getting absolutely just run down his throat by a defender, and he'll put it up there still. So I do appreciate that. And I think there is something to be said about the athlete with the short, quick pass game behind Joe Flacco. I think there's a path there. But, man, 10 overall, I just think he's just way too limited of a player overall. I don't see there's not an amazing trait with him. He's just across the board. The tape is not amazing. So if they take him in the second round, 41, I know a lot of people are upset even if they take him at 41. I can get behind him at 41. Hell, even if they trade up to 32 and take him to get that fifth-year option. It depends on what they do at 10, but I wouldn't be crazy upset about it. I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't be crazy upset about it. But it comes down to scheme fit. And I do think he has a scheme fit there, but I don't love the upside. Clayton Thorson, on the other hand, he had some injuries. He's had a number of injuries at Northwestern, which is a concern. Solid athlete, can move around, known as a smart kid. I know that you were big on him before. We haven't even talked about that yet. I didn't want to blast you or anything. I'll give you the floor here in a second, but he's somebody that I'm not in love with by any means. Hopefully Eric won't listen to this podcast, but I'd rather take a shot on Will Grier even, or Jarrett Stidham, or Tyree Jackson, or Jordan Teamu, or even Ryan Finley, like being completely honest, than Clayton Thorson. But that's just me. I just don't see big level play of him, although I did watch him live this year against the Hawks, and he had a solid game, and kind of like Daniel Jones doesn't have the best talent around him, although Pat Fitzgerald, tip of the cap, amazing head coach. But yeah, that's neither of these guys excite me. I could see if they took Thorson at 71, okay, if you fell in love with him at some point in the process, I get it. We'll see what happens. Even if he's a solid backup, there's value there. Daniel Jones, 41, don't love it. Probably should have traded up, get the fifth-year option, if we're being completely honest. But again, scheme fit, but still don't love either of them.
All right, so I'll take a little time here and talk about Thorson first, because like you said, I was pretty high on him coming into this season because I thought he was going to take that next step. I saw the body type. Because you look at his size, 6'4", about 230. That's pretty typical quarterback, right? Yeah. And I'd heard that he was a very, very smart kid, like you had already said. And there's some games. You go back to his 2016 season, and he was starting to show some major promise in that season. And then 2017 came around, again, showing some promise. His team really went on a great winning streak there to kind of close out the season. And then you come to 2018, and he never took that next step. And that's whenever you're looking at quarterbacks, this is why it's so risky to look at only 1 year. When they're that 1 year wonder, well, things catch up to them. Players change, schemes change, all those kind of things. And you're wanting to see, how does this kid grow? Because, there's going to be so much more thrown at them in the NFL than college. And if they can't grow in college, they're not going to grow much in the NFL. Unless they get just perfect scheme, everything was wrong in college, and all of a sudden they come to the NFL and everything's just perfect. It's just rare. And so, again, I was just very disappointed to see him just not take that next step. And he just had some really, really terrible games this year. He didn't really have any that you're just sitting there saying, man, that was pretty impressive. And
he split snaps too. I know he's coming off injury, but do you remember the name? This is definitely going to date me. Elvis Gerback.
Yep.
His son was the one splitting snaps with Clayton Thorson at Northwestern. I just know it was Gerback. I don't remember which one. I'm 95% sure. Yeah. I remember watching the Purdue Northwestern game to start the year and just being absolutely in awe by Rondale Moore, the Purdue wide receiver. Yeah. We won't get to talk about for another 2 years, but man. Neither of these guys really do it for me. I'd rather take a swing later on. Tyree Jackson, Jarrett Stidham, Jordan Teamu, maybe Ryan Finley. Granted, I'd have Daniel Jones above all of them, but it's a cost to performance ratio.
Right.
You have to give up a pretty early pick. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Jones went as high as 17 for the Giants.
Yeah, I'm with you. Heck, I could even see 15 to Washington.
Yeah. I hope so. I'd like to give our friend Matt Vanderdoes a hard time about that.
But no, Daniel Jones, here's my biggest problem. It's not really I mean, he is limited compared to some of these other quarterbacks. But here's my biggest issue. Everybody keeps talking about his coach, Daniel Cutcliffe. But I look at his games, and I see so many times where he has probably 2 or 3 throws throughout a game that you're just sitting there saying, what the heck were you doing? I mean, that was part of my issue with Jay Cutler when he was in the NFL. He'd have amazing games, and then he'd all of a sudden have these 2-3 terrible throws that you're just like, what the heck, man? And Daniel Jones has gotten lucky quite a few times where he had throws that were just right to a defender and they were dropped. And so when I look at that, I look at a quarterback that I just say I question what he's seeing on the field. I question that he's trying to play hero ball when he doesn't have the arm to try to play hero ball. I see a quarterback that is a little bit skittish at times. I mean, and it's understandable playing behind that offensive line, playing with those weapons, playing against some of the teams like Clemson that he had to go against where he just had a terrible game. I mean, it's a little bit understandable. So he's a little bit of a hard evaluation because of the talent around him. But it's still a little bit where you see, even a clean pocket, there's times where he just makes decisions that leave you going, what the heck? And when I hear that he had the same issue when he was at the Senior Bowl in the practices, where he just had some times where you're just going, I don't know what you're doing, man. It makes me go, I just can't put him into that top tier with the other 3 guys. And while I think you can work on some coaching, and I think we got a great coach to work with somebody like that. I mean, we've seen what he could do with not great talent and turn it into something. But I'm just not – I was a big fan of Daniel Jones like halfway through the season. The more I watched him, the more I just was not all that impressed.
Yeah, I don't disagree. All right, well, we still got – spent all this time talking quarterbacks because it's the money position, but we got a lot of guys to talk to still. But first, a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back going through the listed visits so far for the Denver Broncos, the guys they're bringing into Dove Valley. They got 30 of them. I believe we got 23 names here, and, not all of them might be listed. I know that some teams try to keep these pretty close to the vest, but moving on to the second group now, and Carl, it's your guys. It's the wide receivers we got, and tight ends too. We're going to break down some of these pass catchers, but wide receivers so far, we got potential first-round pick N'Keal Harry from Arizona State, Deebo Samuel from South Carolina, who was my favorite player down in Mobile and productive career there. And he was actually in Dove Valley with Drew Lock. You got Diontae Johnson from Toledo and Keyshawn Johnson from Fresno State. The Keyshawn was a Shrine Bowl standout. And then at tight end, you got some interesting names here at tight end. You got Dawson Knox from Ole Miss, Josh Oliver from San Jose State, and Kahale Warring from San Diego State. So I'll kick it off to you since you are definitely more of the pass catcher guy. Although I'll contend maybe I might get the tight end title between us just because I'm a Hawkeye fan.
Right,
I have to.
That's your group right there. I'm going to talk about a guy. We've talked about Deebo Samuel. We've talked about N'Keal Harry quite a bit. So I want to talk about Keyshawn Johnson of Fresno State. Mm. I love this guy's hands. I mean, above all other traits, this guy, he has the natural hands that the ball just sticks to. He's not at the level of OBJ. I mean, he's got the best hands I've ever seen. That ball just sticks. I mean, he could 2-finger a football coming at him at 40 miles an hour, and it'd be, I mean, even faster than that. I mean, 40 miles an hour in a football is not that big. But again, I mean, that guy, he can just catch anything. Keyshawn Johnson, he's in that next tier below. He makes some great catches. He's a decent route runner that I've watched of him, and he's tough to bring down. That's the other thing. I've watched him carry 2-3 guys on his back before and carry him for an extra 3 or 4 yards. And so for a late round flyer kind of guy, that's one that I would definitely keep an eye on for the Broncos. I mean, they might already have somebody that's like him and Tim, but I'd rather have this guy. I think he'd be a great developmental piece, although he's more of an X than he is the Y that you're looking for, but I'd still take him. I mean, it just adds to the depth of the team and adds another great red zone option for the Broncos.
I will raise you Keyshawn Johnson and raise you Diontae Johnson. Now, I do have a little bit of insider information here from multiple people that Diontae Johnson absolutely blew away the Broncos in his visit. They loved him. And he's a guy that a lot of people are pretty high on him. He is a very nuanced route runner. He's a guy that I would be very interested in. Let me see here. I got some stats on him. He is one of those guys, he did not test the best at the combine, but his tape is very, very outstanding. He can create separation great. And here's the stat I was looking for. Last year, over half of Diontae Johnson's receiving yards came after the catch, and his quarterbacks posted a 140.1 passer rating when targeting him last year in the MAC. He is really a creative route runner. He can generate space quickly, efficient feet, and really good at separating short and intermediate areas. Kind of maybe even a more dynamic Deshaun Hamilton. Not to the level of Deebo Samuel, but still. I think Diontae Johnson, he's a guy, I believe, even Pro Football Focus, they released their top 250 big board, and Diontae Johnson was like 76 or something. He was way up there. So he's somebody you got to look out for there, because I heard that he was mightily impressive to the Broncos in their meeting with him, and he seems like one that people are sleeping on right now. But I do want to talk a little bit about Deebo Samuel and N'Keal Harry.
Well, before we get to them, I will add the other big thing that he brings to the table is he's a special teams star. Yeah, he's the discount version of Deebo Samuel. So, I mean, when you're looking at, say we get past the first couple rounds and you're thinking of Tim Patrick, Deshaun Hamilton, and, of course, Courtland Sutton as your top three guys, and you need those fourth and fifth guys to be special teams players for you, I definitely can see why the Broncos would love this kid. Because, again, he is that special team star. I wish he would have run better.
Yeah.
That was one thing that had me going, oh, my goodness, is this because he's part of a small school that he looks so good on special teams, or is it really that he has that football speed? And, I mean, that just rubbed me the wrong way, because there's some people that are talking that he's going to run a high 4.3, low 4.4, and then he goes and runs a 4.55.
Yeah.
And
he's got a little bit of Stephon Diggs to his game.
That's true. That is very, very true. So I do like the kid. I just, like I said, that took me back just a little bit when I saw that.
Yeah.
Because the tape is very good. It really is. But and like I said, special teams added in there, that's always that nice bonus when you're talking about a late round guy, because that's where they're going to make their money. That's how they're going to make the team. And he would definitely be able to add for that.
Yeah, I just have the stats here now. 7 touchdown receptions this past year, 1 punt return for a touchdown, 1 kickoff return for a touchdown. And he was an all-MAC wide receiver and punt returner. So if you can't find a usage for him day 3, I'm not sure. I mean, it's really unfortunate that the Broncos have so much time between when they pick round 3 and when they pick round 4, because they pick early round 3 and then they don't have to pick until Houston's pick round 4. So a lot of good players are going to go off between there. I mean, it's almost full 2 rounds. But yeah, that's a guy that I'm really interested in day 3. And with going back, I'll be honest with you, I didn't watch too much of him until I saw the Broncos were bringing him in. I liked the tape a lot, but then I went back and saw the combine numbers. I was like, maybe not. But then I heard that he was highly impressive and had some fans in Denver after his meeting. So look out for him. I just want to bring that out there. But bringing it back to the wide receivers, last episode I talked a lot about Deebo Samuel, like him a lot. Concerns with him are his age and some injury history, but man, he's what we wish Carlos Henderson would have been, because he already has shown solid hands. He's a good route runner, and his ability after the catch is very dynamic. I would be very excited to see him in this offense. I don't love him at 41, but if they took him at 41, I mean, it'd be hard not to be excited about him.
You know, he'd be a contributor.
Yeah,
they'd find ways to get him on the field. They'd have plays designed just for him.
Yeah.
So even as a rookie, even though he probably wouldn't be starting, because you got a Saunders and you got Sutton, those two are your definite starters, you're going to find a way to get Samuel on the field, whether it be special teams, getting him on some sweep plays. Instead of having Saunders run those, you got Samuel running them. I mean, you're going to have some goal line opportunities where he can just get open in a hurry over the middle of the field. Like I said, you're just going to find a way to get him on the field for sure. And then Harry, I've said it on the show, he's my number 2 receiver in this draft. I know the Broncos down at his pro day, they really, really liked him, took him aside, talked to him, had a nice meeting with him. And then, of course, they're bringing him in. And if he's there at 41, you go take that guy. I mean, I know that he has a lot of similarities to Courtland Sutton, but having those two guys on the outside, good luck to you. That's a lot of size. That's a lot of big-time hands. It's a lot of 50-50 balls that can be caught. in N'Keal Harry, he's one of those guys that also he has the ability to take a screen pass, and he's not quite Demaryius Thomas athletic, but he can still take that screen pass and do a lot of good things with it. And so I would have no problem if they took him at 41.
The thing about Harry that, people talk about him being an overlap with Sutton, and while to some extent they are big receivers, Sutton, to me, watching him, he is really good at getting off press, and I don't see that with Harry. That is a concern of mine with watching Harry. He actually is not great getting off press, but if you use him at Z, then that's not such an area of concern. Now with Sutton, I am worried a little bit about his ability to get open underneath. He's more of a downfield catch radius kind of guy right now, high pointing the ball. Where Harry, he uses his body quite well and with solid hands can get open underneath. So he's a little bit different with Sutton. They both have the size things, but they're both just different enough where I can see them both being out there. And I do really love Harry's ability he's versatile. You could play him at X, although he's going to have to work on his ability to get off press. But as a big slot, man, Larry Fitzgerald made that thing, and Michael Thomas, honestly, have made that role of that big slot wide receiver a real value in this league. And that's something that we need to talk about. I mean, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is a guy that the Broncos, Elway was at Stanford to see Whiteside, and he actually ran pretty well as well. We'll maybe talk about him if the Broncos take him. But, yeah, I think Harry is probably very high up there. He's dynamic. And while I don't know if he has the upside of a guy like DK Metcalf, man, if you can't find a usage for Harry, you got something wrong with your offense. And pass rusher, defensive back, and wide receiver, those are three positions that you can never really have enough depth. So I'm fine with any of these guys, being completely honest. Keyshawn Johnson would be my lowest rated one just because I feel like he's more limited than these other guys.
Yeah, he's not a great athlete by far. A lot of his catches, the reason he has such great hands is because he has to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he can't be as successful as these other guys. These other guys can get open on their own. They can use their either route running, athleticism, whatever it may be to get open. Where Johnson, it's not quite that case for sure. But no, it's you got to add talent. You got to get some kind of fireworks going for this offense, and you get some of that with at least three of these guys, I would say.
I don't disagree at all. But now talking about some tight ends, Dawson Knox, Josh Oliver, Kahale Warring. Kahale Warring is probably my favorite of these guys. He's going to have to work a little bit to become an inline blocker, but the size profile he has, I'm very excited, and he tested very similar to TJ Hawkinson. He doesn't have that inline blocking that Hawkinson has right now, but as a receiver, he looked like a go-to guy for that offense, and his ability to make plays vertically in the red zone, short pass game, even just watching, I start with guys that start with the highlights, and then I go dig into the actual game film just to kind of get an idea of what the ceilings are like of these players, what athletic spurts they have. And Kahale Warring, man, really impressive. Good get off, a lot going on. Gonna have to work as a blocker, but man, I think he's going to go much earlier than people think. I think he might even go round 2. Josh Oliver, he's a guy that I like a lot. His blocking is going to have to do some work. He could have tested a little better, but really good body control, solid guy. And his get off is a little slow off the line of scrimmage, but again, there's only been 2 players that I asked around, multiple people. Any guys that the Broncos have been impressed with, 2 names I got back. Diontae Johnson, wide receiver Toledo, Josh Oliver, tight end San Jose State. And you know how much Eric has been pushing him as well. I think Eric might have gotten the same tidbit. So look for Josh Oliver, maybe even as early as 71. He apparently was quite impressive. And then Dawson Knox, he looked really good at tape, although they never really utilized him at Ole Miss. What a stupid offense they had there. Sorry to call their offensive coordinator, but yuck. Then looked really well at the combine. The field drills were great, and then ran like a 4.5 40 at his pro day. So he was a quarterback, walked on to Ole Miss, now looks like a really intriguing option. Again, round 3 for him. I would be very excited about that. But do you have any – and also Dawson Knox, not the level blocker that you see like Foster Moreau, Drew Sample, or Hawkinson, but I think there's some solid upside there. He can get after it as a blocker. So kind of has that George Kittle body type.
One thing I just wanted to add there with Kahale Warring is he's a former basketball player. And I know sometimes that's a hit and miss of how those players work out, but it is easy to see how that has helped him as he transitions into football, because there's some jump balls where he really does well getting his body into position, kind of boxing out that defender from being able to really make a play on the football where it's only him or it's a drop, one of the two. He is inconsistent at times because he's still working on what it means to be a football player, but I love his first few steps. That's been one of my problems with some of these other tight ends in this draft is they're kind of that train I mean, once they get going, it's hard to stop, but you got to get them going. With Kahale, it's one of those where he gets going in a hurry. He has that quickness to get open in a hurry, make plays on the short side of things and on the field. There's a lot of times that was one of his specialties, was those like third and short plays when I was watching him. And for the Broncos, that's something that's obviously been missing. We have not had that kind of tight end that consistently shows up on third down for the Broncos. And I just see him being that kind of guy for them, plus being a red zone threat. I mean, with his size, again, you add some other guys. You got Cortland Sutton, you add him. Maybe, I mean, if this was an all-offensive draft, if you took Drew Lock round 1 and N'Keal Harry round 2 and then Warring round 3, that's a lot of extra size added to that offense, man. I'm not saying that's what would happen, but
don't want to play him in a pickup basketball game.
No, you do not. No, you do not.
Looking at his size here, 6'5" and an eighth, 252 pounds. Doesn't have the wingspan or the arm length, much like Hawkinson. Hand side is okay. But then he ran a 4.67, actually a little better than Hawkinson there, 0.4 of a second, but still. Vertical, 86th percentile, broad, 88th percentile, 20-yard shuttle, 76th percentile, and the 60-yard shuttle, 76th percentile. So, I mean, he almost has the same athletic package as Hawkinson from a combine standing. Obviously, the tape matters more, but he's really interesting. I also think he went to a very small school and played wide receiver there as well. Am I remembering this as sounding correct with Warring? Do you know?
I can't remember.
Okay, I'm pretty sure he went to a very small school where he played wide receiver and didn't really, but much more of a basketball player, like you said. He didn't even know what tight end was. He had to look it up. That's how much he did not know about football. So I think the sky's the limit with this guy. You know, everybody was on the Adam Shaheen train a few years ago, that big guy from that small school. I think Warren's going to be the guy that goes much earlier than people think this year. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if somebody even took him above Irv Smith. Like just that much of an upside guy. All right. Well, we still have offense and defense to get to here. A bunch more visits, out of the 23, but we got to take another break. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back. We're going to talk a little bit of offensive line and who the Broncos have brought in, and some guys that are worth talking about here, maybe even worth talking to at some point. Maybe you're dropping a little hint there, but Dalton Risner, offensive lineman from Kansas State, Kris Lindstrom, guard from Boston College, Javon Patterson from Ole Miss, and Bunchy Stallings from Kentucky. And I'll kick the floor off to you there, talking a little bit of offensive line. Dalton Risner, I know he's pretty close to your neck of the woods there at Kansas State.
Well, do we want to let our listeners in on what's going to happen?
I think you should.
Okay. Well, just so you guys know, when after this comes out, we are going to get to sit down with Dalton Risner and record an episode with him. He's agreed to come on our show. I have a friend of mine that is connected to him, knows him very well, and talks to him all the time. And I was talking to this guy, and he said, hey, I can get Risner on your show. And so Dalton Risner, he and I have been talking, and he's supposed to come on our show Friday or Saturday this week. And I'm very, very excited for that interview because I really do think he is a guy that's very high on the Broncos board, fits very well with what they need there at the guard position, plus having that versatility to kind of kick out wherever you need him to be. But I'm very, very excited to talk to that man because I've heard a lot of good things about him. Hard worker, very well liked by his team, just great in the run blocking department. He's got some size, he's got some attitude, and he's a great locker room presence from what I understand as well. And being my neck of the woods, Kansas State, I went to school in that same town. I didn't go to Kansas State, but I definitely hung out with a lot of K-State people. And I think he was an All-American offensive lineman. I mean, just shows that there wasn't as much talent in Manhattan this year, but he's still a huge talent for sure. He was the best player on that team. And man, if the Broncos could get him either late first or early second round, I think they'd be very happy with that decision.
Yeah, I could see him going as high as to the Houston Texans. A team that's absolutely desperate for offensive line, and a guy with his versatility. I mean, maybe not the highest ceiling at that pick, but you got to protect Deshaun Watson, right? Like you have no other choice, especially with how bad they were in free agency, which blows my mind. I don't understand why Houston's an awesome city. I guess the AFC South is kind of tough with the Colts there, but they had money to spend and they got Deshaun Watson. It seems like a good situation to go to. So I don't know, but Dalton Risner, definitely like him. Love the versatility. I do. Again, like I said, the upside, we'll see there. But I think that, day one, plug and play, he's one of the guys that I would be hoping work very hard to fall to 41. Will he? I don't know. I wrote an article. I don't know if you saw my article this week about how the Broncos hoping on interior offensive line at pick 41 might be a bit of a dream because of the tendency of, offensive line, interior offensive line especially. That's too early to go with a top 10 pick most of the time. So what do those teams do picking in the top 10? They go get a quarterback, pass rusher, wide receiver, something like that. What do they do round 2, though? God, our offensive line sucks. We got to get a guy we can plug and play. Then you see a run. So. Right.
Every team in the NFL has a hole in their offensive line. And so when you can get a guy like that of Dalton Risner, that is a plug and play. If you have a hole at that right tackle spot, he's played right tackle. You got a hole at the right guard, left guard. He could even play some center. I heard.
I think he would be a good center.
Yeah. I heard he's taken some snaps at center to show teams that he does have that ability if they need him to. But again, I mean, this is just a guy that you plug and play. You're happy about it. He's a captain. He's, like I said, great locker room presence. Going to be a hard worker for you. There's just so many things to like about his game. And I agree with you. Second round, Broncos are right on that edge of not being able to get those guys.
And another one to talk about there, Chris Lindstrom. He played right tackle for Boston College 2 years ago, moved to left guard this year. Kind of has a little bit of Braden Smith in him in that regard. I don't know if you recall, Braden Smith played right tackle and left guard for Auburn and then moved back to right tackle this year for the Colts and had a really good season there, kind of shadowed because of how good Quentin Nelson and the impact of Quentin Nelson, but still a really good player there. Some versatility there, but I think his best fit is a zone system as a guard. He's a solid puller, but I like the feet and that ability to climb to the second level in a zone system. And again, same range as Risner, very similar to Risner in my opinion. I think Risner's a little bit more nasty, but still a little bit more fluidity and length from Lindstrom. But I think Risner has probably a little higher tackle upside, so that's something that matters. But man, I would really love either of those guys at pick 41. Right now, I think that you have Garrett Bradbury as for me, and from interior offensive line speaking, assuming Jonah Williams won't be there, you really hoping and praying for a guy like Garrett Bradbury. That's like hoping Quentin Williams falls to 10. It's 0.1% chance of him falling to 41, even though center's not that valuable. Garrett Bradbury is just, talking with Brandon Thorne, talking with other people, exemplary work ethic, determination. That dude's a pro already. 22 years old. He's a full-grown adult, so he probably won't make it, especially with his athletic tools. But then you got Risner and Lindstrom. I'd love both of them at 41. I could see them going before that. I could see them there, though. Especially Risner, he's an older guy. That's something that might push him down. That does matter. And he did not look incredible in the field drills at the NFL Combine. So worth pointing that out there. And then the other guy that's worth mentioning in those regard is Eric McCoy, although I'd be less enthused with him than those other two.
He's kind of risen up a lot more because of his Combine.
And the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. There's some things there. The tape is good, but then you add in those things and all of a sudden everybody's wanting to talk about this guy because of how great of an athlete he is. Where Risner, Lindstrom, the Bradbury, the guys you're talking about, they have excellent tape to go with the fact that, Risner didn't have a great Combine, but he's still shown enough where you're sitting there saying this guy's borderline first round pick, early second round pick at the latest kind of guy. Lindstrom, again, he's another one. We're going to do a pound the table podcast here at some point with Eric. And he's one of my guys that I really want to pound the table for, because even trading up to get this guy, get up into the early second round pick. And if he's there, man, you've got a guy that you can plug and play in that right guard spot for the next 10, 15 years, barring injury, and be really happy with what he does for you. And he's just so clean. When I was writing down, trying to figure out his weaknesses, I'm sitting there saying, I guess you could say this is a little bit of a weakness, but it's not really that bad. It's just compared to everything else, it's average. There's just not really any red flags. There's just so many good things, good qualities that, again, I just think he's one of the cleanest and safest players in this entire draft.
I don't disagree. I do wonder about his power always at the point of attack, but I think with that length and his pass protection ability, that's more important. But moving on now, you got other two guys. Won't spend too much time here, but you got Javon Patterson. He's played all three interior offensive line spots for Ole Miss. He's more likely a day three guy, not great length, but I think he can play guard in a zone scheme, but more likely a center, kind of a Sam Jonesy guy. But he's a pretty good athlete. He moves pretty well from what I remember watching him, but I think that he's pretty pretty much filled out his frame, and he doesn't really jolt guys. I don't know how much bigger he can get, a little bit lean, and just not a lot of power. But a center in this game specifically, I think he'd be a pretty good fit there. And then Bunchy Stallings, I have not watched much of him. I will not lie about that. Didn't watch much Kentucky offense, but he did get a block for Benny Snell, so there's some ability there. But 6'3", 305, and again, that just came out today. Looking here, Lance Zierlein does have a quote from him from earlier in April that says that, again, Broncos looking for some versatile guys on the inside, but Stallings played both guard spots and center for the Wildcats and helped pave the way for Benny Snell to become one of the more productive tailbacks in college football. But right now, Bunchy Stallings' body type is sloppy, and he can struggle with some power, but has a good, solid lateral quickness and technique. So he's a guy that, if he hits it off well with Munchak, if Munchak says, "Hey, that's a guy I can do something with," go get him. That's one of the. It's like Kohler. You don't question it. Just like, yes, sir. That's what you want? Okay, yes, sir. So be interested in either of those guys. But moving on now, defensive line. And, they haven't actually brought in a lot of these elite defensive linemen, but some interesting guys to note for sure. You got Khalen Saunders from Western Illinois. That's actually pretty close to my neck of the woods. They actually have a campus right over in, I think it's Moline now, which is kind of right by where we went to college and grew up. Draymond Jones, who some thought was a first round pick coming into the draft process, and it's fallen down a little bit. Not a great body size, not a great tester, but man, his spin move on the interior for Ohio State was deadly. Great pass rusher. Kingsley Keke is one that, perfect. I think he's a perfect 5 technique. Really good, interesting fit there. And then, we'll leave it with those guys right now because those are the more defensive linemen. So, any of those guys stand out to you?
Khalen Saunders is one that I've gone back and forth on because he is a little bit shorter. He has shown that he's more of a gap penetrator than a guy that can really hold up on trying to take on 2 gaps and help the linebackers really go and make some plays. And so I kind of wonder if he has any kind of good fit with the Broncos. I mean, he showed great at the Senior Bowl. I mean, absolutely great. But again, that was with being a penetrating kind of player. And right now it seems like the Broncos are really needing that guy that can really stuff the run, get in there, get down and dirty and make everybody else look good. And I'm not sure Khalen Saunders is quite that player.
I think that I just don't know if he's a true zero tech nose, but I think the athleticism is there. I mean, he can do a backflip in pads. That's got to count for something, right?
That does. I mean, I would be happy if we took him because I loved watching him at the Senior Bowl.
I would love a play. I mean, it's totally dangerous, but like he lines up facing away from the offensive line. Then upon hike, like does a backflip over the offensive line, like lands on the quarterback. Like how? Like that's some NFL blitz stuff, but like maybe the XFL should look into it. That's that kind of thing. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
I was thinking of who was the safety for Pittsburgh that would always do that. Not the backflip, but I mean jump over the offensive line. Polamalu, yeah, he'd always time it up just perfect, and you just be like, oh my gosh, that was a ridiculous play. But no, I like him a lot. I just don't know exactly how they'd want to use him. That's my only worry there. But these other guys, I mean, Draymond Jones, he's a little bit undersized. He's had a terrible offseason. I mean, just one of the worst, I would say, out there. The guy that's really fallen, at least in mock drafts and in the media and how they're looking at him. But you watch the tape and you see a guy that is an athletic freak that can make plays in the backfield. Yes, he gets shoved around in the run game sometimes when he doesn't really win with his first step. But again, he is that athletic freak. So maybe he's a guy that can really, you stick him between Von Miller and Bradley Chubb and go watch this guy eat. I mean, he's one of those kind of players. So, but again, I mean, how high are you going to take him?
Yeah.
Are you really going to use a guy that's going to be a part-time pass rusher, a top 2 round pick? Probably not.
Probably not. Third round, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, the Broncos kind of made that mistake not too long ago.
Yeah.
A guy named Walker.
Yeah. That would not be – second round is different than the third round. 30 pick difference there.
Right.
Pick difference. But, yeah, no, I don't disagree. And also the thing that kind of concerns me about Draymond Jones is that how often was he even the second best pass rusher on that defensive line? Like he had a lot of one-on-one opportunities. He
did. And that's what I'm saying here in Denver, he'd be that good fit because he'd have that kind of opportunity in Denver.
Yeah, but better talent. that he's going up against.
It's true. It is true. So, again, he's not my favorite player. There's a lot of other defensive linemen that I'd rather take and plug and play them into that kind of role for the Broncos.
Yeah,
that I think could be a better fit and a little bit more consistent for the Broncos. But
maybe Kingsley Keke.
There you go. That's a good choice.
I do like him.
Choice.
I know we had Ben Albright on here a couple weeks ago, and I brought up both Dalen Mack and Kingsley Keke, and he said that Mack has been a guy that, you know, there has been some interest in him, but he hadn't heard much about Kingsley Keke. Well, guess what? Kingsley's met with the Broncos, met with them at there, and now he's coming in to Denver for a visit. And he's kind of a little bit of a tweener, but he has one thing that makes me very much intrigued by him. That arm length is crazy. You know, 34 and a half arm length, and then wingspan of 82 and a half, which is 92nd percentile. He's got some, like, not an incredible athlete, but if you move him to the interior defensive line on Mock Draftable and kind of see him go there, his 3-cone, everything jumps up tremendously. You know, 66th percentile 3-cone, really good 40. I mean, a sub 5 40-yard dash. That's what you want from a 3-4 penetrator. And they kind of moved him around to that defensive line there, where he was both edge and interior. So I know that if he's there with the Broncos' first pick, round 5, maybe even that pick round 4, and they like him, I'd have no issue with it because I think he fits the 3-4 defense really well. And I think he's big enough, strong enough where, especially with that arm length, he can do enough at the point of attack to be good in the run game.
I could definitely get behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know he dropped quite a bit of weight to become a lot more impressive athlete and everything like that.
Explosive.
And so I do wonder if maybe getting into an NFL lifting program, he could put on a little bit more weight to be able to become more of a true 3-down player for the Broncos. But beyond that, again, yeah, he's very, very explosive. He's shown that he can get his body into great shape and really get in there. I would love it. I would love him here in Denver, and I think it'd be a perfect fit. But moving on here, we have, of course, then Justin Hollins of Oregon. And he's an outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever you want to call him. And we've talked about him some on the past year on this show and talk about the actual need for the Broncos, that they really do need a pass rusher. You got to take one at some point, I think, in this draft, because it's a little bit bare in the cupboards beyond our top 2 guys. And for a mid to late round pick, Justin Hollins makes a lot of sense for the Broncos.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, we just talked about him, that he was one of my guys as a perfect scheme fit. But so is Ben Benogu from TCU, who I think is, you know, he's skyrocketing up boards. I've heard that could be in the cards in the top 60. So look for him. More of a traits guy than a production player at this point. But when you have the explosiveness that he had, I mean, I think he might have set the record for edge defenders in the broad jump, and I think he was like the 97th percentile for the vertical jump. So a lot of explosiveness in that lower half, and then just a good length as well. So and he's shown versatility as well while at TCU. Now he played a little bit of off-ball linebacker as well, and he had a good 40, even at the same time, 4.62. So, man, a lot to really like there. And, you know, not a guy that you're thinking, you know, round 1, even top 40 for the Broncos, but if he's there round 3 and you're committed on adding edge depth, yeah, definitely. I'm all about those pass rushers, you know. That's kind of tight ends and pass rushers and quarterback. Those are my favorite positions to watch. And now moving on, now we got 2 more players here left to talk about. We got Kris Boyd and Isaiah Johnson. Kris Boyd was probably the least valuable player in the Senior Bowl, but physical, long cornerback from Texas. And then Isaiah Johnson, you want to talk about physical and long? I think he set I know, again, we talk about math bombs, talking about RAS, which is I cannot remember even what it stands for, but it takes into account not only the athleticism testing, but also the height and weight and wingspan of each player and calculates the score. Because, like I've said on here, you know, the bigger, the faster you are, better you are, better prospect you are. Obviously, tape comes first, but you want the height, weight, and speed matters. You know, if you're 6'2" or 6'1", 170 guys runs a 4.3 40, that's nice. But if you see a 6'4", 250-pound guy run a 4.3 40, that's a big difference. So that takes into account that kind of thing. And Isaiah Johnson, I think, is the highest sparked ever athlete recorded at defensive back in the history of the combine. So both those guys really intriguing. Do you have any thoughts about those defensive backs?
I'm not a fan of Kris Boyd.
Yeah. What about at safety?
Well, and that's what I was just about to say was I think if he's going to succeed in the NFL, I would say safety is going to be his better position.
I think that's where he goes.
When he turns his back to the quarterback, he's done for.
Yeah.
He can never look back. Finds himself out of position. He just doesn't look like he has complete control over his body at times. He's just out of control. He's looking for the big play way too often and gets burned. And I can't get behind that. Isaiah Johnson as a project cornerback, because you do need that border guy possibly for the Broncos. Again, like you said, athletically speaking, off the charts. But then again, I look at what the Broncos have done in the past sometimes where they went for some athletes and hoping they could develop them, and they couldn't do it. Now, this new coaching staff, I believe in them a little bit more than I do in the past. But again, you can't always wait as long as you need to. There's a lot of times where you got to get these guys on the field as quick as possible, and I just worry that he's a little bit too far in the past, or just he's got too much work to do. There's things I like about his game, but he just technique-wise gets pretty squirrely at times, not always the greatest instincts. And to me, when I look at cornerback, I mean, Chris Harris and Champ Bailey are my examples of guys that are technically sound and instincts off the chart, partly because they just study tape off the charts as well. But I just – those are the cornerbacks that I look for. And I just don't always see that here with Isaiah Johnson. I mean, now he'd have some great – people working with him to help him work on some of that. But I don't know how much Chris Harris really wants to help guys, because it could mean that he's gone and not getting the contract that he wants, kind of thing. But I don't know. Of the two, he'd be the one I'd rather have for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools there, but I think it's a project. But man, that versatility, that safety, cornerback ability, if you can, I just don't know, man. Cornerback is one of those positions where I feel like you don't see guys like they come in and they kind of like you have an idea of what they are right away, right? Like I can't think of cornerback. Can you think of a cornerback recently that was a first round pick or something like that with hyped coming in, and then you saw like a little bit of projection over time, the growth, and they became something 5, 6, 7 years down the road, rather than obviously right away, hey, this guy has something.
No names coming to mind.
The only one that I can think of is Stephon Gilmore. That's about it. Like everybody else, like when they came into the league, you knew. I mean, even though you have undrafted free agent Chris Harris Jr. makes the rookie All-Pro team. So that's one where I just wonder, like, how much actually is there going to be development and growth with a player like that, already so raw with some issues? Right? Like, am I off there? I don't. Defensive back, I'll be completely honest. Defensive back is my weakest position, unless you're like an obvious jack of all trades, superstar psychopath like Derwin James, where like obviously this guy is absolutely incredible. And he's playing some box stuff, so that's a little bit more endearing to my heart. But like cornerback and defensive back, especially when you don't have all 22, that's something where I don't evaluate it as well, so I rely on other people. But like I can't think of many cornerbacks that have come to the league, even the great athlete ones that come in, if they have raw technique or just not hits right away, then typically they kind of stay the same.
I mean, I guess one could argue a little bit for like Bryce Callahan.
But his was an opportunity thing, right? Like he showed, like it wasn't horrible year one. Like he had to fight for that opportunity because he's an undrafted guy, and then was good.
Right. That's true. I mean, he's just one of those cases where you saw improvement year by year.
Yeah.
To the point of now being one of the top nickelbacks in football. So, I mean, there's some of that, but yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's definitely a position that either you're great or you're not. You got it or you don't. And there's other positions you see that you can definitely develop. I look at wide receiver. That's easily a position where you see guys really emerge years 2, 3, 4 in the league, and even beyond that sometimes. I think of like Brandon Lloyd, where all of a sudden he just became one of the top wide receivers in football. And you're just kind of going, who is this guy? Especially playing with Kyle Orton. And he goes out and has like a 1,500-yard season. But yeah, otherwise that safety cornerback, I'm not seeing it. There's really no names coming to mind here.
The only one that I can think of is Stephon Gilmore, because Bills let him walk, and now he's arguably the best cornerback in football, right? Like that's the only one I can think of.
Well, and some of that you could argue. I mean, the Patriots are like the king of taking other people's cast-offs and like knowing how to get the best out of them. Yeah. It drives me crazy that the Patriots can do that.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think, are other teams just not knowing how to use the players, and Patriots are sitting there saying, oh man, I know exactly what I'm going to do with this guy. They just have so many players that come to mind of being that kind of talent. Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah.
He's one for them that I just go, what in the world? I love that kid coming out. And then he got drafted and just wasn't anything. So got traded for nothing and then became all of a sudden a great player.
Yeah. I do have some some cornerback names here for you that actually I think I could argue the opposite of my point, just because I like to be contrarian. Marlon Humphrey came in pretty raw. There were concerns about him transitioning to that back pedal because he did that shuffle slide at Alabama. This year, arguably one of the top 10 cornerbacks in football. So he's one for the contrary. Then you got maybe Xavier Howard. He was a second-round pick, but early, kind of that same thing there. Byron Jones, that's one, pure tools. Played more safety coming out than now is playing cornerback and just total dynamic player. But for the most part, man, maybe Kyle Fuller, another one. So never mind. It's a little bit hit or miss, but still, like those are first-round talents. And a lot of times I just feel like developing cornerback is something is a little harder. That defensive back. And a lot of times they got it or they don't early.
I added another name, Gary and Conley.
Yeah, he had that heart issue, didn't he? Or he didn't play much his first year.
Yeah, he didn't play too much, and he was kind of up and down when he did play. And this last year, I thought he was a very underrated player.
Yeah.
I thought he had a very good season there for the Raiders.
Especially when you have to guard your receiver for 8+ seconds.
It is true. That is very true.
Pass rush is your cornerback's best friend. So, all right. Well, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering your Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives from draft, free agency, building the Broncos. That's what it's all about for us. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.